The first knock on the door wasn't loud. The second one carried handcuffs. 11 days earlier, I had been blowing out birthday candles, smiling at a cake I didn't want, pretending not to notice how my daughter's hands shook as she passed me the gift. A tablet, slim, expensive, far beyond what a college student working part-time should be able to afford. I remember joking about it. She laughed she'd-robbedly and said, "Just open it, Dad." I did. The screen lit up like nothing I'd ever owned, new, untouched, perfect. And for a moment I felt seen, loved, chosen. I didn't know I was holding evidence. That night, after everyone left and the house fell quiet, I powered it on again. No photos. No apps except the basics. But something about it felt curated, like a room staged for sale. I chalked it up to my imagination. My daughter had always been private. After her mother died, privacy had become her armor. The next morning, I took the tablet to work. On my lunch break, a notification flashed and vanished before I could read it. When I tried to check it, there was nothing there. No history, no alerts, just a faint warmth on the back of the device. Like it had been working hard while pretending it hadn't. That was day 1. By day 3, the tablet started asking for permissions I didn't remember granting. Location, microphone, files. I told myself I was being paranoid. Tech was smarter now. Smarter than me. On day 5, a stranger called my phone and asked my name, my address, and how long I'd lived alone. When I asked who he was, the line went dead. That night, I searched the tablet more carefully. Buried deep was a hidden folder masked as system data. Inside were recordings, audio, video, dates stamped on every file, all from inside my house, my living room, my bedroom, my voice. I sat there, heart pounding, listening to myself talk to the walls, complain about money, mention old grudges, say names I hadn't said out loud in years. Names of people who had ruined me and walked away clean. By day 7, the files had multiplied. Some of them weren't mine, phone calls, meetings, faces I recognized from a past I had buried. People who had lied in court. People who had smiled while taking everything from me. The tablet wasn't just watching me. It was building a story. I confronted my daughter that night, asked her where she got it. Her face drained of color, then hardened into something cold and careful. She told me to stop asking questions. Told me I was imagining things. Told me to trust her. I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to. On day 9, 2 men sat in an unmarked car across the street for 6 hours. They didn't hide, they didn't need to. On day 10, my bank account was frozen. And on day 11, the knock came again, this time loud, authoritative, final. When I opened the door, the police stood there with a warrant and my daughter behind them, pale, silent, eyes fixed on the floor. An officer asked me if I recognized the tablet in his hand. The same one I'd unwrapped with a smile. They said it contained recordings tied to an ongoing investigation. They said my daughter had been involved in obtaining them illegally. They said words like surveillance, entrapment, conspiracy. They took her away without letting her look at me. As the door closed, one thought tore through me, sharp and undeniable. That tablet hadn't been a gift, it had been a weapon. And someone had planned this birthday a long, long time ago. The house felt different after they left, not quieter, emptier. Like the walls had finally exhaled after holding their breath for years. I stood in the doorway long after the police car disappeared, staring at the oil stain it left on the road, as if it were a mark I could follow to get her back. I replayed the last 11 days again and again, searching for the moment I should have seen it. The way she hugged me too tightly on my birthday. The way her eyes kept darting toward the tablet, as if it might speak on its own. The way she asked me casually who I still talked to from back then, as if it were a different lifetime. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards. The echo of my own breathing. I kept reaching for the tablet out of habit before remembering it was gone. Sealed in some plastic bag, tagged and cataloged like a corpse. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I let it ring until it stopped, then buzzed again. This time a text appeared. You finally understand what it was for. My hands trembled as I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Someone who lost everything because of you. The room seemed to tilt. I sat on the edge of the bed, my chest tight, memories clawing their way back into focus. A courtroom, false testimony, a deal made quietly, efficiently. I had told myself I was surviving, that the collateral damage wasn't my fault. Another message came through. Your daughter was never meant to be the ending. I demanded answers. I got silence. The next morning, I went to see her lawyer. He spoke in measured tones, like someone describing weather patterns instead of a human life. Illegal surveillance devices, unauthorized data collection, federal implications. He said the evidence was overwhelming. He said my daughter hadn't denied her involvement. She won't explain why, I asked. He shook his head. She keeps saying she did what she had to do. I left his office with a stack of papers and the sickening realization that whatever this was, it was bigger than both of us. That afternoon, I started digging. I pulled old boxes from the garage, files I hadn't opened since my wife died, court transcripts, newspaper clippings. Names circled in red ink by a younger, angrier version of me. I made a list, everyone who had benefited from my downfall. Everyone who had walked away while I paid the price. One name kept resurfacing, like a ghost refusing to stay buried. He had testified against me years ago. A concerned citizen. A liar with a clean smile and powerful friends. I remembered the way he looked at me as the verdict was read, not with hatred but with satisfaction. By evening I found his current address. Still local, still untouchable, at least on paper. As I stared at the address on my screen, my phone buzzed again. "You're looking in the right direction." I didn't bother asking who they were this time. "You used to record conversations too, didn't you? Back when you thought the truth was enough." I felt exposed. Stripped bare. "What do you want?" I typed justice. The reply came, "And for you to finally feel what it's like to be powerless." The next day, the media picked up the story. Local student arrested in surveillance scandal. My daughter's photo everywhere, her face frozen in a moment of shock I recognized too well. Comment sections filled with strangers passing judgment, dissecting her like a puzzle they didn't care to solve. I went back to the house and tore it apart, searching for anything the police might have missed. In the attic, beneath a loose floorboard, I found a flash drive taped to a beam. No label, no explanation. I plugged it into my old laptop with shaking hands. Inside were more files, older ones, years older, conversations I remembered having but not recording, meetings in parking lots, phone calls late at night, proof of the lies that had destroyed me, captured from angles I'd never seen. And there, in a folder marked only with a date, was a video of my daughter. She was younger, high school age, sitting alone in her room, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," she said, voice steady, eyes fierce, "then they've already come for me. And that means you're finally seeing what I saw." I felt my throat close. She talked about discovering the truth by accident, about realizing who had really orchestrated my fall, about watching me shrink year after year, pretending I was fine. She said she learned how to listen, how to record, how to wait. "I didn't do this to hurt you," she said. "I did it so you wouldn't have to do it yourself." The video cut off abruptly. I sat there in the dark, laptop humming, understanding dawning slowly and painfully. The tablet hadn't just been collecting evidence, it had been bait. And my daughter had walked into the fire first on purpose. Outside, a car engine started and idled longer than necessary. I closed the laptop and moved to the window, careful not to be seen. The same unmarked car from days earlier sat across the street. This time I wasn't afraid. I finally understood the rules of the game, and for the first time since my birthday, I knew exactly what my next move had to be. The next morning, I left the house as if it were just another day. Coffee in hand, briefcase swinging, acting like the world hadn't shifted beneath my feet. But every step toward that unmarked car parked across the street carried the weight of 11 days of fear, confusion, and revelation. The driver didn't flinch when I approached. Neither did the passenger. Both wore the same expression, calm, patient, and terrifyingly confident. "You're awake," the passenger said, voice low and measured, almost conversational. "I'm done hiding," I replied, not sure if I meant it for them or for myself. He smiled just a hint and handed me a small envelope. No words, I tore it open. Inside were coordinates and a date, nothing more. I spent the day planning. Every detail mattered. Every misstep could cost my daughter more than the police already had. I drew maps, memorized routes, created contingency plans, and wrote down names I hadn't thought about in over a decade. Old enemies, old friends. People who had the power to bend reality without breaking a sweat. And all of them had underestimated me once. They wouldn't again. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her face, the way she had stared into the camera, the way she had carried the burden she didn't deserve. 11 days of silence had turned into a storm inside me. I realized that the revenge she had sparked wasn't hers alone anymore. It had become mine too. On day 12, I followed the coordinates. A warehouse on the outskirts of the city, abandoned for years. The kind of place you'd see in a crime drama and think it was fictional. The lights were off, but I could hear movement inside, footsteps, low voices, a single faint beep of electronics like a heartbeat from the shadows. I slipped inside, keeping to the walls. The air smelled of rust and old machinery. In the corner I saw her, my daughter, sitting on a chair, hands tied but her expression calm, almost defiant. Around her, 3 men I recognized from the old photos, people who had benefited from my destruction, people who thought they had won everything. They hadn't counted on her. "That you finally came," she said, not a question but a statement. I nodded. "I promised myself I wouldn't let them break you." One of the men laughed. "And what, you think you can stop this? You've been powerless for years, haven't you?" I stepped forward, letting the calm mask the fury burning inside me. "I've been planning," I said, "watching, waiting, and now." My voice dropped. "Now it's my turn." I pulled the tablet from my jacket, the same one that had started this nightmare. I turned it on. The screen flickered, revealing hundreds of files they didn't know existed. Audio recordings, video footage, documents proving lies, corruption, and betrayal spanning years. Every transaction, every deal, every lie. Every single person in that room was implicated, and they all thought they were untouchable. "Everything you did, every dirty secret, it's all here," I said, letting the words hang like smoke in the air. The men's expressions changed, panic, confusion, realization. They moved toward the exits, but I was faster. I had planned for this. With a few quick commands on the tablet, I triggered alarms in the city, calling in police reports, anonymous tips, and digital breadcrumbs that led directly to them. They were surrounded, trapped by the evidence they had left exposed. One tried to pull a gun. I didn't flinch. I only pressed a button and the door locked. The tablet's camera had already uploaded their faces' movements and confessions to multiple authorities. Within minutes, the sounds of sirens echoed outside. My daughter watched silently, eyes steady. "You remembered everything," she said. "I remembered enough," I replied. As the police swarmed in, I untied her hands. She stood, brushing herself off, her usual composure back. "I told you," she said. "You had to feel it for yourself." I stared at her, realizing that revenge had never been just about punishment. It was about understanding, strategy, patience, and above all, survival. 11 days had shown me more than years of struggle ever had. It had sharpened instincts, revealed truths, and forged a bond between us that even the darkest forces couldn't sever. By nightfall, the men were arrested and their empire of lies crumbled. News channels splashed the story across headlines. High-profile figures arrested in surveillance and conspiracy scandal. But no one mentioned the father and daughter who had orchestrated the unraveling. No one knew we had worked together, side by side, to dismantle the network that had destroyed our lives. Back home, we sat in silence for a while. The tablet rested between us, a symbol of betrayal turned weapon of justice. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" I asked her. She shook her head. "I knew it would. And I knew you could do it too. I just needed you to see it for yourself." I smiled faintly, realizing how much she had grown, how much I had underestimated her. She wasn't just my daughter. She was a strategist, a survivor, a force that had changed the course of our lives. Outside, the city pulsed with lights and sounds, oblivious to the reckoning that had just taken place in a quiet warehouse. But inside, we had achieved something far more significant than headlines or arrests. We had reclaimed control over a life that had been manipulated and shattered. And though the road ahead would remain uncertain, one truth was undeniable. Whoever thought they could break us had underestimated the power of patience, intelligence, and a calculated mind. We had learned to watch, to wait, to strike, and the lesson was seared into our bones. The tablet powered down. Its screen dark. The story it contained had ended for now, but the impact would echo far longer. We knew the world had changed, and from this moment on, no one would ever catch us unprepared again. I looked at her and finally allowed a rare, unguarded smile. "Happy belated birthday," I said, voice hoarse but steady. She laughed softly, a sound that carried relief, pride, and a hint of mischief. "Best birthday ever," she replied. And in that quiet moment, amidst the ruins of betrayal and the victory of justice, I understood the true meaning of revenge, not just as punishment, but as empowerment, strategy, and survival passed from one generation to the next. It had begun as a birthday gift. 11 days later, it had become a reckoning. And together we had rewritten the rules. Days passed, but the house no longer felt like mine. It felt like a battlefield after the storm. Every shadow and corner whispering the memory of what had happened. My daughter and I moved carefully through it, step by step, knowing that the calm was temporary. But this time, we had the upper hand. The authorities had taken the perpetrators and their lies were unraveling in court. Yet I knew that revenge, once set in motion, never ended with arrests. It carried a weight, a ripple that stretched further than any of us imagined. Every call I received reminded me of it. Journalists wanting statements, old enemies testing their boundaries, allies checking in to see if I had lost my mind. I didn't answer most of them. I had learned that silence was as sharp a weapon as any blade. One evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, the tablet between us again. Her hands rested lightly on the edges, as if it were a chessboard waiting for the next move. Her face was tired, but there was fire in her eyes. "Did you ever imagine it would end like this?" I asked, voice low almost to myself. She shook her head. "No, but I always knew it would end on our terms." The words struck me harder than any confession from the people we had exposed. On our terms, not theirs, not fate's, ours. That was the true victory. Not just the arrests, not just the crumbling reputations, but the reclaiming of power we had lost for so long. The following day I returned to my old study. Boxes of old files, papers I had long ignored, photographs, and court transcripts lay scattered across the floor. For the first time I allowed myself to examine them without anger clouding my mind. Each one was a puzzle piece, a fragment of the life that had been stolen from me, and now, they weren't just reminders of loss, they were proof of endurance. I picked up a photograph of my late wife. Her face smiled back at me, warm and familiar. For years I had blamed myself for everything, her death, our struggles, the way life had unfolded. But now I understood the world had taken its blows, but we had learned to respond, to survive, to outsmart it. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. My daughter stepped in. Holding 2 mugs of tea, she handed one to me without a word. I accepted it, feeling the warmth seep into my hands and, somehow, into the cracks of my resolve. "We've won," I said quietly, more to reassure myself than her. "We've survived," she corrected gently. "Winning is a story for others. Survival is for us." I nodded, realizing the truth of her words. Revenge had brought us here, yes, but survival would keep us here. Revenge was fleeting. Survival was lasting. Later that night, the house was silent, the kind of silence that made every creak of the floorboards loud. I walked through the living room, glancing at the empty space where the tablet had rested. Its screen, dark and unlit, felt almost sacred now. A tool of betrayal turned weapon of justice. I remembered the first time I had held it, innocent, shiny, a gift from my daughter, and how quickly it had transformed into something else entirely. I thought about the 11 days that had changed everything. The fear, the suspense, the realization that even the people we trusted could become instruments of destruction. And I thought about my daughter, the quiet strategist who had borne that weight so gracefully, teaching me to see the world with sharper eyes. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I watched her moving through the kitchen, preparing breakfast with an ease that seemed almost impossible after what we had been through, and for a moment I allowed myself to breathe, truly breathe. The storm was over, at least for now. Weeks passed. The media coverage faded. The courtroom drama concluded. The world returned to its usual rhythm, oblivious to the quiet reckoning that had taken place in our lives. But my daughter and I knew the truth. We had confronted the darkest corners of manipulation, betrayal, and power, and we had emerged unbroken. I began to teach her what I had learned in those 11 days. Strategy, observation, patience, restraint. Not just to survive, but to thrive. Not just to seek revenge, but to understand its weight, its consequences, and its necessity when wielded wisely. She listened, absorbed every lesson, and I realized that the roles had shifted. She was no longer just my child. I was a student as much as I was a parent. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fairy oranges and deep purples, we sat together on the porch. The city lights glimmered in the distance, indifferent to our triumphs and scars. I turned to her and said, "Do you ever regret it?" She shook her head. "Never. Not for a second. I would endure everything again if it meant keeping us alive and teaching you how to see the world clearly." Her words hit me with the weight of truth. She had been the architect of this plan, the one who had taught me that patience, intelligence, and subtlety were stronger than brute force or rage, and in guiding her through those 11 days, I had finally understood the depth of love, strategy, and resilience. Months later, life settled into a new rhythm. We weren't naive. We knew the world could still strike at any moment, but we were prepared. Every move we made was calculated, every risk measured. The lessons of those 11 days had been etched into our minds, hearts, and souls. We had learned to anticipate betrayal, to turn tools of destruction into weapons of empowerment, and to reclaim power from those who thought they held it over us. The final piece of closure came quietly one morning. I received a letter in an unmarked envelope. Inside, a simple note: "You have both seen the truth, you have both survived. Let the rest of the world catch up." No signature, no return address, just the words. I understood immediately. It was from the person who had orchestrated the initial surveillance, the puppet master whose hands had guided events from the shadows. They had watched, they had tested, and they had acknowledged us. I placed the note in a drawer, the tablet resting beside it. Now dormant, but always a reminder. My daughter and I shared a look, silent but complete. No words were necessary. The story that had begun as a birthday gift, as a symbol of innocence and love, had become a crucible that revealed our strength, our intelligence, and our unbreakable bond. In the quiet of that evening, I realized something profound. Revenge, in its rawest form, was never about cruelty. It was about balance, justice, and awakening. It was about ensuring that the world could not harm us, or anyone we loved, without consequence. And most importantly, it was about transforming fear into power. We had endured 11 days of terror, manipulation, and uncertainty. We had faced those who thought themselves untouchable. And in the end, we had reclaimed not only our daughter, our home, and our dignity, but ourselves. The house was quiet now, peaceful, but beneath that calm lay a new understanding, a readiness for whatever came next. The tablet lay on the table, dark but not dormant, a symbol of the power of knowledge, strategy, and vigilance. We had learned to wield it, and we would never forget. I sat beside my daughter as the last rays of sunlight faded, feeling a deep sense of completion. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to relax, to believe that we had truly emerged victorious. Not through brute force, not through luck, but through patience, intelligence, and the unwavering bond between a father and his daughter. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, as much as to her, "The world can try, but it will never break us again." The night fell, calm and resolute, wrapping the house in shadows that no longer frightened us. We had survived, we had learned, and we had won. Not through hate, but through understanding, strategy, and the unbreakable connection forged in the crucible of 11 days that would forever define our lives.